Welcome back to another episode of the Dirt Path Podcast. So today is a little bit of a different episode than we've done before. And we're coming at you with another solo episode today and a bit of a new format that I've been curious about exploring. And so we're trying it out today, which is a lot of times on these episodes, we're doing interviews with what I call Dirt Path Trailblazers, people that are living life differently. And we showcase their story. And we do that for those dirt path curious out there, the people that are in an unaligned lifestyle or unaligned 9 to 5, and basically give you an idea on how somebody else has lived life differently, whether it's in entrepreneurship, becoming a digital nomad, or whatever their path is, giving you different ideas and possibilities out there, as well as for the dirt path wanderers, right? Those episodes really help you because we dig into after you've made the decision, what are the mental battles that you need to go through to have success in that? You were an entrepreneur. Now, how do you have success with that? You've made the decision to become a digital nomad. How do you manage the complete lifestyle 180 that it takes to do that? But today I'd like to do a different kind of an episode where we're going to do more of a deep dive into a certain type of dirt path. And so we're going to be starting with the dirt path that I took, which is really anybody who's interested in becoming a digital nomad or really just living abroad with a 9 to 5. So today's episode is for you if you are just tired of living life through your 3 weeks of PTO a year, feeling like and maximizing that for your travel just in those 3 weeks. That's the time that you feel most alive. That's the time that you're most you. Maybe you're more social then, and you just love the different cultural experiences. Maybe you're fine with where you live, but a few months a year you want to escape the winter. But whichever it is, you feel like you like your current career and job, so it's not that that's the problem, but you just don't have that lifestyle piece. So you're a bit stuck in not knowing how to get that lifestyle. Do you have to quit everything and go fully blow up all of your life? But that probably sounds a bit scary. Or can you take some other step to be able to nomad with your 9 to 5? And so that's what we're going to be going over today, because today's episode is all about the 5 mistakes that most 9 to 5ers or most employees make when trying to go nomad. This episode, I'm also launching my Engineer to Nomad Playbook. So these are the 6 steps that I used myself when I was an electrical engineer to be able to find a new company and work with that company on being able to travel the world while working remotely. All as an electrical engineer in one of the most traditional industries out there. I nomaded for 3.5 years, all as an electrical engineer. I then pivoted to, at that same company, creating a whole new role on the HR side, where I acted as our head of remote and, among other things, created our digital nomad program, allowing all engineers and anybody at the company to utilize this program to be able to work remotely while traveling abroad. So fulfilling a dream that many people had. So now, if you don't know, in my other business, I recently started Engineered Flexibility. I'm helping more engineers and more people do the same, helping them increase flexibility at their work, like being able to travel and live abroad while working remotely without having to sacrifice their career. And so no, this episode is not only for engineers. I do target engineers mostly with the Playbook, and that's mostly who I work with, just because I do know the exact ins and outs that engineers have to go through. Is there's typically a few extra hurdles that they might have to do than potentially another 9 to 5 career, that's being able to work at the laptop. However, the Playbook in this episode is perfect for really any 9 to 5er, as long as you have the ability to work remote. All right, so let's get into the 5 most common mistakes that 9 to 5ers make when trying to become a digital nomad or just go abroad while working remotely. Number 1 is the black and white thinking trap. So let me give you a story on this one, and I like the story of Engineer Tim. So Engineer Tim went to Guatemala for a week. He had some transformative experiences. He met some really cool people and had conversations that he's really never had, especially not in the engineering cubicle that he's used to. He opens up his life. He thinks about life differently. And this week is surreal and he just wants to know how he can do it more. Well, he gets back the next week and goes into the office Monday morning, sitting at his desk looking at his computer, and is feeling a bit empty. Is feeling like, okay, I'm fine with this job. I like this job, but something's missing. I don't want to wait another 6 months until I have enough PTO to get abroad. And so Tim, without really thinking much about it, just messages his boss and says, hey, what do you think about me working remotely, while traveling? I really love my trip. I would love to be able to do some longer trips and to experience some more cultures, and maybe I can just work remotely from there. It's a casual ask, and his boss sees it as that. Tim's boss just asked a similar question to HR, what they think about, or are there any policies against people working remotely while traveling abroad? The HR person has a list of 10 different things to do that day. They're pretty busy, so they just kind of plug it in for a few minutes, asking AI what are the different liabilities that we need to be aware of for this. The AI spits out some scary words like tax liability, productivity concerns, time zones, cybersecurity risks, and more. And because it was a casual ask, and maybe this employee was newer, the HR team decides, you know what, that's just a lot of scary stuff. I don't think we're going to do this. So they forward the response from AI to the boss. The boss basically forwards that to Tim saying, hey, doesn't look like we can do this. So now Tim is feeling dejected and he's left to wait another 6 months until he has enough PTO to go abroad again like he wants to. Because Tim is stuck in the black and white thinking trap, thinking that your ideal lifestyle and your career, especially in certain careers, it's not possible to do them both. Have the ideal lifestyle, like to be a digital nomad, like Tim dreams of, to experience that for a year or two, he's got to quit his job. He's got to go on sabbatical. Maybe he has to become an influencer or whatever that is, or just do something other job online, but he has no clue. He's never really thought about starting a business and just doesn't have a ton of ideas for that. And so he's left thinking, do I want to keep my job that I've worked really hard to get, or do I want to travel? And what I'm here to tell you today is that let's ditch the black and white thinking and let's embrace the gray. Kind of a side note is I've realized this more as I've got older, is really embodying my name, right? My name is Grayson, so the son of gray. As I've experienced life and lived life, I really just feel like there's almost nothing in this world that is truly black and white, that's truly, truly binary. There's different shades of gray for almost everything, and this being a perfect example of one is there's no reason that you necessarily have to quit a job to go nomad. And this is a perfect example of it, is there's a lot of different ways, like I did myself and many people that I've worked with and helped or just met along the road, that you can live your ideal lifestyle with an ideal career, even one that you might not think is able to be done while working around the world. And so the first thing to really help yourself with is just to open up that possibility to ditch the black and white thinking, like Tim, and just start to think in the gray. Start to embrace the gray. I mean, it's really going to be helpful as we get into more things down the line with this, but starting to feel comfortable with the gray and finding an example and a path that works for you. And maybe you're a calculated risk taker like myself, and you don't feel like you want to fully quit everything, change your whole lifestyle and your job at once. You want to do it one step at a time. So I'm here to tell you to embrace the gray. We have to get rid of this binary thinking and be open to other options and other ways to work at it to be able to get there. Which leads me to common mistake number 2, which I do not recommend, is many people unfortunately do try to do to get there, which is becoming an undercover nomad. So these are people that basically don't tell anybody at their company. They already work remote and they just decide, you know what, I don't think my company is going to say yes. A lot of times they don't even ask anybody and they just go abroad. And they use VPNs, they don't turn their camera on or just use a fake background all the time. And nobody knows, or maybe just their immediate team or boss knows because they're at a giant company, but they're doing it undercover. Unfortunately, this is way more common than you'd think. I've met tons of nomads that are like this in my travels these last 5 years. Now, I will be realistic with you. There's many people listening, many people at a 9 to 5 right now that cannot just go ahead and talk to their current company and it's going to end up great. That you're going to be, becoming a digital nomad tomorrow, that you'll be able to work remotely and travel abroad tomorrow. There's many companies that frankly just will never allow it. Generally, the bigger the company, the less likely it is that they'll allow it. And so this isn't a judgment on the people who are doing this. I get it. You want to realize this dream and you don't want to get anything in the way of it. And you're willing to, risk a lot of different things to do that. However, I'm really here to tell you to avoid it if you can. It's really just not the path that you want to go down. An example is in Asia, we had a friend that was also with us in Thailand, and they were doing this and their computer broke one day. And so they had to go and try to get their computer fixed in Thailand, which at first they didn't think they had the right part and everything. Eventually they were able to get it working. Nobody found out, but they had 48 hours of crazy high stress and thinking they're going to get fired. And even if you never have a situation like that, it's constantly in the back of your mind. I knew people who would go late to basically every meeting because they wanted to skip the small talk in case they accidentally mentioned something about being abroad. And when you're doing this, you're just distancing yourself from your job, which, for a lot of people, we don't love our jobs, but distancing yourself from it, losing all this personal connection because you can't tell people about your life, constantly having the stress, thinking, what do I do if my computer breaks? What if they find out? Because there are ways that a company can see that you're using a VPN. All this stuff really starts to build, and it's just not a sustainable thing that I'd really recommend to anybody. I've seen people do this, get fired. I've seen a lot of these different things, and I would really not recommend it. So I don't want to spend a lot of time on this one just because it's really not something that I recommend. And the people that I work with, I never recommend this path or go down this path because it's just not something sustainable. And I don't think in the end that it's worth it. Yes, you do get to live that lifestyle, but to trade it for, again, constant stress, constant worry, not even being able to enjoy your job whatsoever, putting that distance between yourself there. In my experience and in the people that I've seen in the 5 years I've been doing this, I just avoid it. And so that leads us to the common mistake number 3, which is underestimating the amount of energy that this transition is going to take. So first and foremost, the easy one that I can talk about is just time. If you go ask your boss today, and maybe they're super flexible and they're super forward thinking and super open about stuff like this, and you say, hey, boss, I want to go tomorrow or go next week, you're putting them in a really tough position, and it's probably just not going to happen, to be honest. So time is one of the biggest ones. For example, it took me a year before deciding I want to do this, before actually making it happen. I joined a company on the agreement that after 6 months of basically proving myself and coming up with a plan that I would be able to go and work remotely from abroad after joining the company. So the timing is really a big one. And in general, if you're going to stay at your own company, probably within about 90 days-ish is a good mark for that. And if you're going to be joining a new company, it's anywhere from probably about 6 months to a year is the realistic time frame that this could take from you deciding today that this is my priority and I'm going to do this to realizing it in the future. So for example, if you are somebody that is in a state like me in Maine or any, northern state that has a pretty extreme winter, maybe you love parts of the winter, but you don't love all of it, and you want to escape this winter. You want to do a month in the Caribbean on the beach and just get some warmth and an escape. Or maybe you want to continue some hobbies and you want to do 3 months in Argentina in the Patagonia Mountains like I did one year. Again, escape that winter this year. I would be starting now for your clock to make sure you can make this happen by then. Again, the earlier you start too is going to give your company a lot more trust that you're thinking about this the right way and not going about it in a rushed manner. Also, of course, it depends on your situation. You might be able to ask your boss and they say, sure, yeah, you can go tomorrow? Just a simple ask. You don't need to do a lot. And they just say yes. This was an example of Steph, who was on the podcast not too long ago. She basically just brought it up to her boss and they said yes, no problem. There's going to be other people like Matt, who I worked with in the past, who wanted to take his family abroad. They wanted to live in Spain for an extended period of time. So it took him a year of leaving his current company after not being able to do it there, to finding a new company and working with them and proving himself, to then being able to go abroad. Again, it took myself a year, and it really depends on where you are in your situation. And so in the playbook that I mentioned, the Engineer to Nomad Guide, I give you a couple calculators to help establish exactly, what the likely chance is that you'll be able to do this, and if you can do it at your current company, or you have to find a new company. And so these two calculators, the first is really focusing on you, right? What is your leverage that you have as an employee based on your years of experience, how good of an employee you are, etc. Because ultimately, if you are a brand new employee, you're right out of college, you have no experience, somebody to say yes to this is a lot less likely than somebody that's been doing this for 20 years. They don't need any hand holding and everything like that. On the flip side, we also are looking and have a calculator for the company, because like I said, the bigger the company, the more rigid that they're going to be. And so there's a few indicators that you can look at for the company of what's the potential for this. And you basically take the two numbers, put them together, and you can see what is your likelihood based on your leverage in your current company, or to use this to look at potential new companies as well. So those calculators are in the playbook, and they walk you through how to get your numbers and figure out the likely starting point for yourself. But so regardless of the professional aspect, again, if you can ask and start tomorrow, unlikely, or you ask and it doesn't work and you have to take a year just to find the job that lets you do it, there's also going to be a lot of personal changes that come with fully changing your lifestyle, going from living in one place permanently, you live in an apartment, in whatever city in the US, to you're moving apartments every 2-3 months, or whatever the cadence is for you. Or now all of a sudden, you have your home base, but 3 months a year, you're doing a couple spots or one spot. All of that is going to be a big change to your lifestyle, and have a lot more things that you're going to uncover than you think, right? Especially if you're going longer, right? What are you going to be doing with your place? If you're going for just a month, maybe you can afford to, and you have the luxury to just not have to rent it out. You don't want to move your stuff and everything. But if you're becoming a full-time digital nomad like myself, you want to make sure that you time you leaving with when your lease ends. Or maybe you have a house. Are you going to rent that out, or maybe do a home exchange to not, be paying double the rent while you're gone, depending on how long you want to be gone? Of course, what do you do with your stuff if you're doing a home exchange, or if you did like me and you're getting rid of everything to live in a backpack in a suitcase? There's a lot of these different questions that will come up if you're wanting to make this transition. So just know that it's going to take a lot more energy than you think it will right now before you're getting into it. And so with this, one of the things in the playbook, the very first step is to, assess your commitment level. How much do you want to do this? There's different levels to that, and it's perfectly okay with whatever level you end up, because this is your choice. But there's really 3 levels. The first is, I'm only going to do this with my current company. So if my current company says, nope, we won't allow you to do this, you give up. And so this is for people who you want it, but you just really love your company. You love the people you work with. You have really good benefits. If you stay for them for another couple years, you reach this whatever income milestone, the stock investment portfolio, whatever it is, and you're not willing to give that up. That's what it is on your priority list. Totally fine. The next level of commitment, higher commitment, level 2, is when you want to work it out with your current company, but you're open to finding a new company, right? Or maybe from the calculators, hey, it's just not going to work in my current company. I need to find a new company. Now you're opening your doors up a lot. You still want to be able to maintain that paycheck, right, of coming in, and you want to be able to work remotely while having that stability of a 9 to 5, but you're not closing yourself off to only asking your current company. And the final level, level 3, is the highest, which is you're going to ask your current company. If they say no, you're going to try to find a new one. But ultimately, you're going to set yourself a deadline that after 6 months or after a year, if you can't find a company, you're just going to go. And you might be thinking, well, isn't the whole part of this playbook like to do this with my paycheck to keep my company and to travel, right? Yes, it is. But this is the commitment level that I myself did. And spoiler, right? I did end up traveling as an employee. But this one is the most effective, and I'll tell you why. It's because the people that have this commitment level, they have the highest commitment level. So they do the things that other people won't. When the people at level 1 and level 2 stop, they keep going. So you're looking at a lot of different ways that you can do it if you don't have the company, but you really want that company just like they do, just like everybody, all the other commitment levels do, but you're just going to go that extra step further. And your company and whatever company you're looking at also know that when you talk to them, hey, this is what I'm going to do. And so you're laying your cards out on the table, not in a aggressive way, but in a less casual way. Say, hey, this is what I want. Can this work for us? And so you're much more likely to get that yes when on the other side they know, we have to do this or we lose them. So now they have to take that request a lot more seriously. And so for this one, I would recommend telling a friend, emailing yourself at a certain time. That's what I did. I set myself an email that would hit in 1 year that said, if I'm not abroad yet, I'm going to do whatever I can. I'm going to put in my 2 weeks notice today and just go without a job. And so again, don't underestimate the energy that it's going to take to become a digital nomad or to be able to work remotely while traveling abroad. All right. Common mistake number 4 is you ask for permission rather than propose a partnership. Or another way to think about it is you make it only about you versus making it a win-win, right? You're thinking about it from your perspective, not from theirs. This is the most common mistake by far that people make and that stop them from achieving this, right? Go back to engineer Tim, the story I gave at the very beginning. He brought it up very casually, but didn't do a lot of research into it, didn't think on it, and didn't get ahead of anything that they might be saying. And so when they brought up these things, he just said, oh, that's what it is. And then he gave up as well. Think about this with anything in your life. If you want somebody to help you out, you don't phrase it in a way that only helps you. You want to phrase it in a way that will also help them. Otherwise, why would they do it? And so let me give you an example of what this looks like with wanting to nomad with a company. If I'm phrasing it for myself, I might say, hey, I really want to go travel and work abroad. How can you make this work for me? Okay. You asked it. But again, you're phrasing it almost like you're against them. And how do you do this for me? Like it's a right, rather than phrasing it as a win-win. So the way I did this in an interview was I said, hey, this is what I want to do. It's my dream to work abroad while traveling remotely. And if you let me do this, I will be the best employee ever. I'm willing to work for less. I actually said that in the interview when they asked my number. I said, I don't care if you're letting me do this. As long as it's somewhat reasonable, I really don't care, because I knew that I would prove it later down the line. But as well as, what are the things that are going to benefit them? Well, you're going to get a supercharged employee that will go above and beyond all the time, right? Because you're giving me my ideal lifestyle. The other thing is I will be the poster child for this for other people that can do it in the right way. And so this can be a recruiting tool. This can increase our talent retention and attraction. So this happened to me at my company. Once I started doing this successfully, I again created the whole program so other people could do this. So we had multiple people join the company simply off the fact that we had this program. And so you want to give them a reason why they want to do this too, not just why they should do it for you, but again, posing that win-win. Then you want to be getting ahead of the 4 most common things that they're going to bring up that you need to know ahead of time. So number 1 is taxes. The tax liability of this is the number 1 risk of this. And so wherever you're going to be going, you want to look at the specific tax scenario and change how you're going to travel to make sure you're not a tax liability for them. So in the playbook, I go into a little bit of permanent establishment, which is basically the thing that you are trying to avoid, right? You don't want to become a tax resident of whatever country you're going to. So you can adjust how long you stay in a country to make sure you avoid that, and certain things that you do there to make sure your company isn't paying taxes there. Because that's really ultimately the biggest thing that they're going to be worried about. The next one is productivity, right? They just think of you going to Mexico for a month. It just sounds like a vacation to them. They want to make sure you're still working and not just treating it as a vacation and just, on your computer on the side. So they're really worried about making sure your productivity doesn't go down. So again, I would flip it. How would this increase your productivity? Well, I would ask, if somebody lets you live your ideal lifestyle, I don't know, would that increase productivity for you? For me, it definitely did. I was a lot more happier in my personal life. So I gave a lot more effort to the company that let me achieve that. The next is time zones. Them thinking about you working in Asia, working on an island in Thailand for a month, when you've never done this before, really, really terrifies them because they don't want to deal with the time zones. Even if you say, hey, I'm going to work in the same hours as you, they know that you're going to be pulling the night shift, and they're just worried then, now because of productivity concern again, they're just worried about how to make that work with the time zone. So what I really recommend to people is for your first trip, try to minimize the time zone changes. So if you're in the US, try to go to Mexico, try to go to South America. There's lots of places you can explore with no time zone changes. So just take this concern right out of it. Or if you go to a place like Europe, try to adjust your hours so you're working the exact same hours as them, again, at least to start, and you can work on this piece later once you get going. The last concern that they're going to have is IT, and I'll be honest, this is the trickiest one to get around. Each company sets their IT up differently. Depending on the industry, you're going to have different concerns. However, not to say that there isn't things that you can do, but it really depends on the setup that you have with the company. So things like VPNs are a good potential thing to be doing, avoiding public networks, sticking to private networks, going to like a co-working space. All these things are different potential ways of doing it, but it's really more based on the specifics of you and how your company operates. But do know that there typically are things that you can do, especially if you approach it with your IT team, if that becomes a concern, with this win-win mentality, with this wanting to solve it and not just making a them problem in mind. And so when you go to ask, again, instead of asking permission, you're proposing a partnership. So when I went to ask, I created a full agreement, a nomad agreement is what I call it, of things that I'm going to agree to if you let me do this, right? How to eliminate the tax concerns, the productivity concerns, all these different things. I'm just preemptively giving this to them when you go ahead and do the negotiation or do the initial ask. And you're with that showing them not only have you fully thought about this, but hey, this is somebody that can be trusted and not they're just going to put this all on us. We're already not sure about them. I don't know about this. Last one, the number 5 common mistake that people make when trying to become a nomad with a 9-to-5 is the post-yes complacency. So I say this a lot with people that I'm working with, which is once you get the yes, your job is not done. It has just begun. Typically you're going to get a yes, maybe 3 months ahead of time or 6 months ahead of time, a month. Whatever it is, you're going to have a lot of work to do in your personal life to, again, do all those changes to set your life up to have success in going wherever you are, as well as in your professional life, right? You've got the initial yes from the HR team and your boss, but you had that general plan of how you're going to make it work. But how do you now put in that plan and talk with your boss of like, this is how we're going to make it work? So there's a lot of pre-launch things that you'd want to do. What I typically recommend is creating a pre-launch checklist for your professional and personal life to get these things out of the way. And then once you've launched, that becomes a whole other battle because now you want to make sure you're doing this sustainably, again, from the personal life and professional life standpoint. And one of the things I really recommend is whether it's your first time and you're doing just a month trip or you're doing an extended trip and you're just getting started, you really want to fight off early the on vacation perception. I kind of mentioned this earlier, but a lot of people have the perception that digital nomads are just, on the beach or at the pool, just with their laptop over the side, just shaking their mouse every once in a while, looking at Teams, or not really working. You want to shake that perception off as soon as possible. So what I did is I actually worked overtime and extra for the first couple of months that I was nomading. I wanted to make sure I got even better results than I was doing before, because they allowed me to do this, and I'm not going to let them now take it away. I'm not going to let anybody say that I'm not working, I'm not going above and beyond. They not only should not see a productivity dip, they should be seeing a productivity increase from you. And this really is something that never goes away. For example, whenever you're on a Zoom call, you always want to make sure you have good internet, because if you have bad internet one day, they're going to blame it on you traveling and not just the fact that you had bad internet. So the fact that you want to have a backup plan for what happens if the internet at whatever place you're going to be working goes down. Is there a nearby co-working space? If your Airbnb goes down, can you hotspot from your phone? Because unfortunately, again, the perception is going to be blamed on you traveling. And one of the funny things is when I was working, I keep laughing because I keep thinking back to when I was traveling across the world. I always, again, made sure I had really good internet. So a lot of the times I would have better internet than the people in the office. But you just never want to have that scenario where you have bad internet, especially consistently, and let that become an issue. The other thing is that you set the precedent. Most of the time when you ask a company, there's nobody that's done it before. So you're going to be setting the precedent for this. You're going to be the guinea pig. And so not only is this on your future self, you want it to work for your future self to be able to continue this, but you're also doing it for other people at the company. If you do it right, maybe this is a thing like my company did, that they open up to others. But if you do it wrong, not only could you lose it for yourself, but you could lose it for other people. And this one happens, unfortunately, way too often. I was chatting with an engineer recently that somebody at his company recently did a trip and unfortunately didn't go well. And so now they're throwing all these different policies up and everything because they want to avoid this other situation. And so now this person that I'm talking with is going to have to jump through extra hurdles and be extra prepared going into this talk with his boss and with his company about doing this. Not that it becomes impossible, but it does become a lot more difficult if whoever does it first messes up. So if you are the first one, which most of you will be, you want to make sure you are setting the precedent and doing a really good job. The other thing is you have to remember at any time they can pull the plug. They might have said yes to you before. That doesn't mean they have to say yes to you in the future. So one of the people I've worked with in the past, her name is B. She's been a nomad for many years. And one day her company said, hey, more people are starting to do this. And I think, we're not sure if this really works. So we're going to be putting down these restrictions. And so we got with her and looked at those 4 biggest areas of concern, and their biggest one was taxes. And so she laid it out for them because she really hadn't done that before because they were pretty casual about it. But as they got bigger, their concerns worried. Somebody looked at it. Then she went ahead of them and said, hey, this is how I'm traveling to make sure these liabilities aren't actually a risk for you. And now she's still traveling to this day with that same company. So at any time, if you had an easier time at the beginning, that doesn't really matter. You can have that harder time later. So you always want to be prepared if that conversation ever does come up, even if it's something that you don't do. All right. So those are the 5 most common mistakes that people make when trying to become a digital nomad with a 9-to-5. So I'd highly encourage you to look in the show notes, check out the description, and pick up that free guide that I just put out, the Engineer to Nomad Playbook. Again, applicable to really any 9-to-5er that can work remotely, not just engineers, but there's a bit of extra things that are dedicated towards engineers in that one. It's not going to be easy like any dirt path, but this is your roadmap to the ideal lifestyle that you're looking for. If you just happen to listen to today's episode, but this isn't you, but you do know a friend who loves to travel, would love to travel more, experience living abroad, and is in a 9-to-5, send them this episode. Is it may help them, reach that dream for themselves. But for those that implement it, I would love to hear from you. If you want to chat further, or I have my links for engineered flexibility in the playbook in the description. All right. Hoping to see you guys on the road somewhere. And we'll see you next time here on the Dirt Path.
Saw the exit sign flash by, a whisper in the breeze said, take a chance, don't wonder why, just follow where it leads. Oh, the dirt path, it ain't easy, no map to guide the way. Slow and hard, sometimes uneasy, you stumble through the clay. No signs to tell you where you're bound, no traffic to obey. But every step on broken ground builds something great someday.